The views expressed and opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Z-Talk Radio, its affiliates, or sponsors.
The invaders. Alien beings from a dying planet. Their destination, the Earth. Their purpose, to make it their world. David Vincent has seen them. For him, it began one lost night on a lonely country road looking for a shortcut that he never found. It began with a closed, deserted diner and a man too long without sleep to continue his journey. It began with the landing of a craft from another galaxy. Now, David Vincent knows that the invaders are here, that they have taken human form. Somehow he must convince a disbelieving world that the nightmare has already begun.
Join us now as we get lost in space.
You are Lost in Space. I'm your host, Al Warren. Now today we're getting lost in space with two authors, Bob Mitchell and Jason Quitt, who just wrote a book, Forbidden Knowledge. Now Bob Mitchell we've had on before. He's an author and reporter and written several books on the subject of UFOs. And Jason Quitt is new to the show. He's a multi-dimensional time traveler. So we're going to talk about his experiences and how they came to the book. Right after these words.
I'm really psyched Subway's bringing the flavor with this new guacamole for a couple of reasons. First, people really love our guacamole. Rich and creamy, made from Hass avocados and just a hint of jalapeno to keep it interesting. The other reason is, it's just really fun to say. Guacamole.
Guacamole.
Guacamole. Guacamole. Guacamole. Guacamole. See?
Come in and try our new guacamole on sandwiches like the Chipotle Chicken Melt and discover how it turns up the flavor on all your favorite sandwiches.
Subway. Eat fresh.
Hey, Dr. Phil here. You know, I help people solve difficult problems every day, but one problem has me stumped: childhood hunger. Nearly 16 million children in America struggle with it. Luckily, the Feeding America network of local food banks collects surplus food, giving hope to hungry children and their families. But they need your help. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
You can listen to us anytime, anywhere now. Download our free app now for the iPhone and iPad. Look for the Warren Exchange or House of Mystery app at the Apple App Store today.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today, for here am I sitting in a tin.
I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Holy mashed potatoes.
Welcome back to the House of Mystery. Now, joining us today, we have two authors, Bob Mitchell and Jason Quitt. Thank you guys for both being on the show.
Pleasure to be on again, Al. And I think your listeners are going to have a very interesting time listening to Jason.
Yeah, I've been reading it. It sounds quite fascinating. Some of you guys have written a book called Forbidden Knowledge. How did you come about doing that? So, Bob, I'm familiar with you and some of your books, and how did you two come to meet each other?
Well, we didn't know anything about each other until last summer at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford. And I was happy sitting with Stanton Friedman selling my book at the time, which was Intrusion, Alien Encounters. And lo and behold, this very tall, 6'5" person came up to my table and stood in front of me and just sort of pointed at the book, pointed at the cover, which had a cover of a mantid, and smiled. And I can't remember if he even said anything, but perhaps telepathically I got the impression that he had met this being. And that was our first introduction, but there seemed to be some kind of a connection. And then later on, when I went and saw his talk, he started by saying that he remembered all of his past lives. In fact, he chose his parents in this life, and that we basically all do. And I thought that was such a interesting comment to make that something clicked in my mind, and I said, I really want to. I think I have to write a book about this guy. And then we ended up the rest of his talk. He had started talking about ancient Egypt and past lives, and my wife Kim, who has always had an affinity to ancient Egypt. And doesn't know why, she seemed to have an instant connection with him. So it was almost as if we're meant to meet, and we did, and we hit it off pretty well, and the book really flowed very quickly. Jason could probably add a little bit to that too.
Yeah, no, I remember just walking by the table and seeing this picture of a mantid being. And I've had a couple mantid experiences in my life, and I've never actually seen a picture of it depicted just like the way Bob did. So when I walked up to his table, I was like, I know that guy. I've seen that guy a lot. And I remember Bob and a couple other of the speakers came to see me talk, and remember, this was my first time going public in the UFO community. It was my first talk in that market, and I was actually quite afraid because I thought that what I had to say was very spiritual. It was all about consciousness, and it had to do with all the different experiences and beings that I've met in my outer body experiences, astral travel, and what I've learned. And what I was shocked is that all the speakers that were there were actually very interested in that topic and really wanted to hear what I had to say about the subject. So Bob came up to me afterwards and said, I'm writing a new book, would you like to be a part of it? And we got together in September, and we decided that, if we were going to work together, this would have to be co-authored because there was going to be a lot of work being put into it. And you know what? When things work, it works, because this book just flew. like right on the pages. Everything went so smoothly. Me and Bob worked so well together, and the book is still #1 on Kindle US. So it's reaching a lot of people.
Yeah, and it just came out March 23rd, and almost instantly it became #1 in a very few hours, in fact, I think. And it has stayed that in either #1 or certainly in the top 5 for the past, what is it now, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks since it's been out? Something like that. So the reception to it has been really quite amazing.
Well, why do you think that is? Like, do you feel like there's a connection, or a lot of people can relate to the experiences in the book?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have thought so when I first was writing it, but it seems to me that there is so much going on right now in the world where everybody seems to be talking about consciousness. And, at one time everybody was talking about the Greys, and now it's all this higher level energy, consciousness that people are suddenly waking up around the world. And Jason's been through this all his life, and I think his message or the stories and the information he's brought forth in this book is really tapping into something. And so many people have come up to us, at shows, telling us how much his energy work and how much his Egyptian postures that are in the book have helped them, and how much they actually sense some of the things that he's experienced. So it's quite an amazing ride that even I'm on at this point.
And Jason, you talked about the mantic being, so describe that for the listeners.
Okay, well, my first experience with them, and I'll just have to go back a little. Most of these visitations happen when I'm sleeping. So I'll go to sleep, and then I'll either be pulled out of my body into, we'll call it the astral world, or I'll leave my body. Now, I'm not prepared for any of these beings to come to me. So just imagine you're at home and you're sleeping, everything's great, and suddenly you feel that there's something in the room, and you open your eyes and there's a giant manted face about an inch from yours, looking right in your eyes. Your first reaction is, you scream. It's shocking to be just woken out of a dead sleep and then, seeing something that close to your face. So my Mantis experience was very strange because it's a very big being. So it almost had to kind of like bend down and kind of sneak through the door, and it would come right up to me, get very close to my face and start speaking to me, but it was speaking an alien language. So I had no idea what it was trying to say to me. And the only thing I could do was, just look back at this being and just say, I'm sorry, I can't understand you. Can you please speak English? And at that point, the being is very confused that for some reason I can't understand it. And it just turns around and walks out. And there was another Mantis experience we had when me and a friend were in Peru. And my friend, her name is Nora Waxen Spirit, who's an Algonquin shaman. We were in Lake Titicaca, and the altitude there is very high. I think it's about 12,000 feet above sea level. And she was having a tremendous time breathing. So she was laying in bed and she was freaking out because she thought she was going to die because she just can't get enough oxygen. And as she was thinking this, she saw this Mantis being just walk out of the shadows, come next to her, and then just breathe in her mouth. And she said she felt her whole lungs open up and she can breathe again. And she asked who this being was, and she got the name, We Are the Isles. And Isles was spelled EYLES, and it stands for elevating your levels or elevating your lineages. So it was told to us that these beings come to people when they're ready to move to a different level of consciousness. So they're there to help support and watch the transition into other energy systems.
And that's interesting that Jason says that, because in my past books, when people have had mantis encounters, it almost seems like the people that are having these encounters do have a very high level of consciousness. They've been into meditation. They're not just the average Joe, I think you would say, and they have this experience where they feel nothing but absolute love for them, and instead of fear, which is not the same in all cases for any other alien experience. And the fact that the mantis first looked confused when he met Jason, all the other ones seemed to be telepathic thoughts. So it was almost as if this mantis being already thought Jason had reached the level where it could understand its language, but it couldn't, and I think that's why it was kind of confused. But I think in the future, I think the telepathic thoughts will be there, because Jason has certainly reached a high level of consciousness, and I think he's going to get even higher.
And Jason, I was going to say, when you first were approached by the mantis, how did you feel? Like, did it make you feel terrified, or the love, like a lot of people say?
Well, I think most of these experiences, when they happen to you, the first thing you feel is shock and fear, because it is almost like you're just getting woken up out of a deep sleep and you have something strange in your bedroom. But then when your heart calms down, I didn't feel any fear from this being at all. I just felt the initial shock of being woken up. And for me, this is like a lifelong experience where these things don't happen just once or twice. They've happened hundreds and hundreds of times to me. And it gets to a point where, I would say the first 10 times it's very frightening. But after that, it just becomes normal. You just you get woken up and you go, oh, okay, it's you again. What do you want? Type of thing.
When did it first start for you?
Actually, it's been my whole life. I could even remember very early on, different beings would come to visit me, and mostly it was very scary back then. It looked like just very strange beings. I had a being that used to kind of hang out in my closet when I was a child, and the being, it almost looked like a dehydrated person. So it didn't really look very nice. It almost looked like a scarecrow. But this being, never did anything. It just kind of stared at me, and some nights it would kind of take me on journeys to just show me like his life and where he lived, and showed me that he was dead. Showed me a coffin in my basement with the person in it, and he was kind of showing me that this was him. So what I've learned over the years is that images are very deceptive. So I've seen beings that look very scary, and they're actually very nice and friendly. And I've seen beings that look like glowing angels that are out to get you. So you really have to be careful in that world, because images are very deceiving.
And so when you started seeing the beings, when did you actually start traveling or stepping out of your own body?
I would say when I was about 22 years old. That was the big moment in my life when things changed. And I started to experience something called sleep paralysis. And what that is that you'll wake up in the middle of the night and your body will completely be frozen. It'll be completely frozen. And you're basically yelling inside your mind to wake up, or to move a finger, or to do something, just to wake up. So it's not a very nice experience. You feel like you're in a coma, basically. You're screaming in your head to wake up. And this would happen once a month. It would happen then once a week. And eventually it was happening once a night to me. And as this was occurring, I could start to feel things in my room with me. So I would feel something walking around the bed or coming through the door. And this would really upset me and scare me because you're basically frozen. You have no idea what's going on, but you definitely know you're not alone. So one night I was just so angry, and I had enough of this that I was just screaming in my head, and I was kind of like trying to shake myself up. And I shook so hard that I popped myself out of my body, and I rose up above my bed, and I can see my body laying on the bed. And at the foot of my bed was a very tall being. It looked almost like a Grim Reaper. It was just a big dark shadow. His head almost touched the ceiling. And this scared me so much that I went back into my body and woke up. And obviously, you know, it was quite a shocking moment in my life to realize that, you know, there's something outside of us. There's something outside of the physical realm. And what I experienced was not a dream. It was not a nightmare. I was basically experiencing what it would be like to leave my body. And ever since that moment, it almost opened a door for me. So now I could actually put myself into a sleep paralysis state and just shake myself out of my body free and go play in the astral world. So even though this being, to me, was very fearful and it looked very scary, this being actually was there to open a door for me. It didn't hurt me. It didn't do anything to me. It just showed me you can leave your body, and that's how it did it.
And where do you find that it's taking you? Like, it showed you a doorway, and so now you're traveling, as I understand it, to the future and to the past.
Yes.
So do you get to select, or does it just sort of do it randomly?
No, I never really got to select unless I was like really asking night after night to be taken somewhere specifically. But what it was is that after I started to leave my body and get comfortable in that state of being, I would get visitations at night from different beings. And these beings, they didn't look alien. In fact, I couldn't really even see them. I could just see their outlines. They looked like invisible shadows. And they would come and they would actually just reach in and pull me out of my body. And they would shoot me up into outer space with them. And, you know, you pass through the ceiling, you go up into the sky, I can see the earth below me. And then they would direct me down to different points on the planet. And then they would shoot me back down to those locations. And when I would get to those locations, I would be in a different timeline. So it's almost like astral time travel. And this is the thing with time travel, is that I'm never going there physically. I'm always going there dimensionally. So at first they would drop me off in locations, and none of these locations and journeys were fun. And that's what I want to remind the listeners. These were the most frightening experiences of my life. And they always dropped me off and showed me very terrible things. So when I would come back to my body, I'd be very shaken up, and I wouldn't be able to even talk to people about these experiences because, you know, who would believe me? They'd probably lock me up for even talking about this stuff.
So you kept it all quiet? Like, you didn't talk to your friends or family?
No, I didn't. I really didn't. And because, you know, I'm a very grounded person, and I knew immediately that, you know, having these type of experiences and being, you know, thrown into these worlds, I know how the world looks at people that have experiences like this, and I knew what would happen if I would come forward with that information. So I just kind of kept quiet. And, you know, I never really wanted to go public anyways. Like, I've done small healing groups and I've opened up and talked to them. But to go mainstream and to release a book and to be on all these different shows, I mean, that's something I would have never thought I would have done, because it's just too out there. But since I've come forward, I've been getting hundreds of emails from people that are basically telling me they've seen the exact same things, they've been taken the same way. And so what I'm learning is that this might just be a common occurrence to a lot of people.
Why do you think that is? And I mean that in the sense of, you said that every time they send you to a time point, it's always terrible things that you see, or frightening things. Is there something that they're trying to show you and maybe other people that are experiencing this?
Yes. I believe that time travel in the future is used as a warning system. What I mean by that is that they can show us possible timelines. So if we follow the certain paths that we're on now, these things could happen down the line. So it's almost like a shock and awe thing. They show you the worst things and say, okay, now go back in time and change that outcome.
Maybe you should tell the listeners some of the things you've experienced in this future timeline.
Sure. So the first thing that they showed me was they dropped me off, I believe it was somewhere in the United States, and they showed me that the earth was completely burnt. There was nothing left, and the sky was very, very red. It was a very deep red sky. And when I looked over the landscape, it was very barren. It was almost burnt. And even the trees were just kind of low cinders. Like, you just saw them maybe a couple inches off the ground. And then they pulled my consciousness down through the earth, and they took me into a bunker. And there was a man in this bunker, and it looked like he was suffering greatly. So whatever was happening on the planet, this bunker did not protect this person. He was not doing too well. And then they took me back, put me in my body, and I woke up. So when I go on these experiences, it's not like, first of all, they don't talk to me. I never had a communication with these beings. They just showed me things. And I could not get a sense of a time frame or exact location. It was almost just getting dropped off to experience this thing. The next place they took me, the only way I could describe it was a children's concentration camp, which was not a nice place to be. It was a big open field that was surrounded by very high concrete walls that were barbed wired on the top. In this open field, there was many children from the ages of about 5 to 13, I believe. And there was even a tank that was inside this enclosure. And this was probably one of the more horrific things they showed me. And, it's hard to even paint a picture of what I witnessed there. But basically, I don't think they were wasting bullets on children. I think they were just kind of running them over with the tanks. So, I got to be there, experience that. And then when I came back from that, I think that experience out of all of them was the worst. I was like white as a ghost. I couldn't even talk for a couple days after that experience. And I basically was almost begging these beings that, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. I don't want to go on these journeys with you. I don't need to see these things.
I think it's good for the listeners to understand that when you go on these journeys, you're there in not a physical form, but in an astral form, and you're observing things, but you're also hearing things. So you heard the screams, you heard the the agony of these kids getting run over and the tanks explosion. So it wasn't a silent viewing for you. It was actual, as if you're experiencing it with them, except nobody can see you.
That's right. So it's because it's in the astral state, I'm basically just an observer. But what I found very interesting about these experiences is that I was completely immersed in the environment of whatever that was. As in, I could even feel the wind on my body. I can hear the sounds. I can feel the emotions. I could almost read the minds of these children and the soldiers. So I was very much connected to everything that environment had to offer. So it was almost like I was there physically. But I think it's just dimensionally, so they wouldn't be able to see me, and I wouldn't be able to do anything, so I couldn't affect what was happening.
So when you say other people are going through the same thing, so are they experiencing the same thing? Have you met them and talked to them about this?
Actually, yes. And the amazing thing is that this book has touched a lot of people, and I was very open about all these experiences. I never hid anything, or I never held back on what I really thought. And I got an email yesterday actually from a lady who was saying that she could not believe that I wrote this because she was taken exactly the same way and she saw exactly the same thing. And it brought back so many memories for her that she just had this instant connection with the work. She just had to email me and tell me this. And I find there's a lot of people that have been through this. But like I said before, I think that there are certain people, I don't want to say they're chosen, but I think they've come into this life with these type of connections. And they're shown things or taken places so that they can maybe improve their lives, change their life course, heal themselves, or even help spread this message that, we can control our path and our destiny. And, these futures that people are seeing, they're not written in stone. They're there as a warning system to say, choose your path wisely in this world and don't just go along with what everybody wants.
And who are the beings that are visiting you, and where do they come from, and why are they doing this?
I would say that they're multidimensional beings. So they're not bound by the third dimension like we are. And I truly believe, after years of experiencing them, that they're our extended family, which means that we have many lives, current lives taking place in other realms and other dimensions on other planets, and that we can actually communicate through our consciousness between these lives. So, for example, at the beginning we talked about the Mantis being. I truly believe that in one of my lives, or many of my lives, I am a Mantis being, living in that world with those beings. So it's almost like my family coming to say, hey, how's it going here on Earth?
So what is your history then? How many lives do you think you've had?
From what I've gathered, you couldn't really put a number on it. It's almost like life is eternal. And it's not, and we use the word past life, but that's actually not true. There's no such thing as past life. Once you go into the fourth dimension or higher, all time and space is happening at once, which means my past life is actually my current life. My future life is actually my current life. And you can jump between the timelines and lives to experience all of that at the same time. So being physical on Earth, let's say we're doing an energy healing or a shamanic healing, a soul retrieval. When we're working in the energy field, we can actually be working through the physical body heal things on many timelines in many places throughout time and space. So our concept of time is very strange here. We experience time as we're moving forward through it, but once you, I would say, get a multidimensional perspective on it, it's all happening at once, and these timelines can be chosen through just simply a thought form or an emotion. We can be pulled back into these future or past lives.
And you were speaking of Shademan Healing. Now, something happened to you where you were sick and you needed some healing. Explain to the listeners what you went through.
What I went through is called a reliving. And what a reliving is that something in my past lives, for example, in this past life, it was an Egyptian past life, and I was poisoned and thrown into a sarcophagus with scarab beetles to, kindly eat me to death. And in this life, I connected to that life, and those energies were brought forth physically here, which means I started to actually manifest that death in this life. So I was literally mysteriously dying, and it looked like my whole body was being eaten alive. It was not fun. It was not pretty. And, I don't even like talking about it because it was just so awful. But, I went to all these doctors, and they did every test they could, every blood test they could, and they could not find one single thing wrong with me. But I was literally dying, being eaten. Like my skin was opening up, my skin was falling off, I couldn't see, like everything was going wrong with me. And I turned to Peter Bernard, who's a good friend and teacher of mine. He's the Algonquin shaman of Golden Lake, Ontario. And he said he would do a remote healing to see what was going on. And a remote healing just means he's going to look into it spiritually. It had nothing to do physically. And what he said was, I'm going through a reliving, which I already pretty much established. And he said there was a lot of curses and I would say a lot of terrible things put on my life. And once he did the healing, literally the next day I started to get better. And within a week, it was almost like my skin on my entire body just came right off. It was almost like a snake skin. And I just shed my whole skin, and I was like a brand new person in 1 week. It was an amazing turnaround. And when I spoke to Peter, he said, it's a good thing that I called him when he did, because, I was like this for about a month, and every day was worse than the last. And he said there was almost like a professional hit put on my life for going out and doing what I'm doing, and it's a good thing I called him when I did. So.
Why do you think that happened to you? Like, what was the reasoning behind that?
The reason is that I started to go public with a lot of the things that I knew. And, it's fine to be the second person to say things. It's not really good to be the first person to say things. And that's kind of what I learned. So I gave a whole talk to a group of people about Egypt and Atlantis and the Earth grid. And I don't know if you're familiar with the elongated skulls that have been found all over the world.
Right, yeah.
So I gave a talk about that, and as I was talking about that, I was energetically attacked, and that's what brought those timelines into this timeline. So I've just learned to be a lot more careful in how I say things or what I say, but I think it was a very good thing to go through that, because it actually forced me to write this book. because as I was, lying in bed, thinking, okay, I'm never going to get out of this bed again, I thought nobody's going to know my story. Nobody's going to know what I've seen or learned, and I think it was almost a month later that I met Bob, and Bob said, I want to tell your story, and I said, great, I have a story to tell.
And I had no idea what story he was going to tell me. All I was interested in was how he knew how to choose his parents.
Right.
And I knew it had something to do with reincarnation, and because of my other books, I knew there was a connection, an alien connection to reincarnation. So I just thought this was going to be something like that. But as it turned out, it was basically a story about what he has learned over hundreds of past lives, going back hundreds of thousands of years, that basically shows that most of what our generation, or even generation before our generation, have learned through mainstream scientists and archaeologists and historians, is that they just keep perpetrating a fabricated lie and a storyline that really doesn't make sense. But everybody accepts it. And Jason has actually lived some of these timelines that shows that a lot of things happen that they don't want us to know about.
Is that is that the reason for the title of the book, Forbidden Knowledge?
There's a lot of forbidden knowledge in here.
I think the reason we called it Forbidden Knowledge was that it's almost like it's taboo to talk about these subjects. It's taboo to come forward with them and just be completely real and honest about, these are topics that are very much real, yet we don't want to look at them. So it's almost like we've closed our eyes to this whole other reality, and we refuse to look there. And I think that's why we've chosen the name Forbidden Knowledge.
What's the reason? What's your opinion of why it's so forbidden? Why is there such a negative aspect to talking about these subjects?
Well, I think that we've created such a complex reality around what we should believe is true, that any little crack in that story will break the whole belief system. So we've just kind of perpetuated the same story over and over again, and anything that comes to counter that story is swept under the rug.
And we were talking about choosing your parents. So how do you know you chose your own parents?
Well, it's actually the first memory that I have coming to this planet, or coming to this world. I remember suddenly being conscious and being a baby and crawling down a hallway, and there was many other children with me. It almost looked like a 1980s airport. It had long hallways that were carpeted, and we were crawling down these hallways, and there were women there that looked like airplane stewardesses, and one of them said to me, "It's time to choose your parents." And they took me down another hallway, and they guided me through a tiny little door that only a child could fit through. And as I entered this room, it was almost like I was in this big movie theater. It was a dark, big room. And when I looked forward, this portal, this white portal, opened up in front of me, and it was almost like a movie screen. I could watch my soon-to-be parents when they met, before their wedding. They showed me various scenes of my parents, and I just kind of sat there and watched them. And in this child's mind, I knew that these were going to be my parents, and the next thing I know, I'm born. And when I first started to talk, I would actually go up to my mother, and the first things I would say to her was, "Aren't you happy that I chose you as my parents?" And she even remembers this. The first things I wanted to talk about was me choosing her.
And now, is this something you think we all do?
I assumed that we all do this, and I've actually heard many other people come forward saying that they've actually experienced the same thing. And, you know, I always make a little joke about this, saying that if we all knew that we chose our parents, you know, we can save a lot of money on our psychiatrist bill. Yeah.
You got to remember, too, that this is just how Jason came into this world as an incarnated being. He has lived many lives on other worlds in different forms. So when he goes into the form of perhaps an alien being, it might be a different experience, but he's only remembering this latest life. So that opens the door to all kinds of other ways.
Yeah, and, you know, I really think that, you know, these are almost like implanted memories. They're implanted in a way that kind of reminds us where we came from or what happened, because it's almost like it helps us create a path that we go down in life. We derive our path from our memories and our experiences, and I think that's why a lot of these things have happened to me, is to kind of steer me in a very different path than most people.
And so now, Bob, has this changed your opinion about what you think on aliens and visitors and travelers to the Earth?
Yes, very much so. And it's actually been, I mean, I've been sort of fighting this in my mind back and forth, because on one hand, I have talked to so many people who have experiences of alien encounters, and you know, they're as real as us talking right now. And I've sort of come to the conclusion that a lot of the alien encounters that they've experienced are probably happening not in their physical form, but in their fourth dimensional form, just like Jason has experienced it, although they don't realize it. Because many of them, you know, have the same feeling of being taken out of their room and going physically through the ceiling of their homes, which seems to be quite impossible as a third dimensional being. And you add that to the fact that people say that, you know, they've been taken, but their spouse is lying right beside them, and they never see them leave, or the children, you know, never see them leave in the middle of the night. To me, it makes more sense that while their physical body is still where they are, it's their consciousness that has been taken by beings, and they are doing whatever they have to do to them to a conscious level. A lot of them talk about, you know, being on medical tables and having experiments done on it and feeling pain. Well, the mind is where the pain is felt, not in your physical body. So I think the people that are experiencing this don't even know that they're not physically there. They think they're physically there. It's almost like somebody who has a hand cut off where that phantom pain is still there. And it's quite a shock, first off, for them to be taken. So in that sense, I think the connection is on the fourth dimensional level. But that's not to say that all abductions take place in the fourth dimensional level. I think some of them may take place in the physical level, and unfortunately those ones, I think, may be more earthbound to, you know, nefarious military people working in cahoots with an alien species, because the idea is to strike fear in everybody, and fear controls people. And Jason will talk about what fear does and how beings feed off the fear of humanity to put this planet in sort of a controlled situation that we are right now. But certainly the reincarnation to me is very real now. The fact that you know, time may not be what we all think it is, and that's natural for most of us to think in the third dimensional world, because that's what we're used to living in. We're used to, you know, looking at a clock to seeing it, you know, go around. But if you open your mind a little bit and think about what fourth dimension and 5 and 6 dimensions are, these concepts are so foreign that the average person has no idea what they really are, what the world is they're living in. And from talking to Jason and learning about his story, it even makes me more absolutely positive that we don't live in the world we think we do.
And Jason, is this still going on for you right now?
Yep, it's ongoing. It's not something that happens every single night, but, you know, it just happens when it needs to happen. And for me, it's just totally common and normal now. So for me, it's almost just like another state of dreaming. So you go to sleep and you're either not remembering your dreams, or you're dreaming, or you're pulled out of your body and you go on an experience. So to me, they're all kind of the same thing now. They're just all normal life.
Well, and now I'm going to have to ask this now. So how do you know that this is not just a dream, or have you come across anything that you can validate in your experiences in this living life now?
Well, I would say that first, we don't really understand what the dream world actually is. And in ancient traditions, the dream world was actually the first level of the spirit world. And this is our platform to travel different dimensions. So, you know, to say, is this just a dream? Well, it is just a dream. In fact, even living is just a dream, if you would, you know, put it in terms of our mind just experiencing subtleties of vibration and electrical currents and chemical reactions. I mean, but the interesting thing is, when I first started to go on these journeys, I would be given a lot of information. And when this first started happening, you know, I thought the world was perfect. I wasn't a conspiracy guy at all. I wasn't even a religious person. I didn't really have any spiritual concepts. So I didn't really understand what was happening to me. And a lot of the information I would get in these journeys, the first thing I would do is run down to the computer, and this was even before Google. I think I had to Yahoo it.
Oh, no.
And I, just to look it up, like if I would get words or things that I couldn't understand, I would have it and write it down, and suddenly I would find that, okay, this is actually a real thing that I'm learning. So it was a very interesting process where, you know, most people will go and they'll study books to get information. With me, it's given right to me, and I have no idea what this information is. And then I have to go and try to find what that information actually is through the internet or books or other sources.
Now that you've been to the future, is there something you can tell the listeners that we have something to look forward to, or is there something to fear?
I would say that we really have to kind of change the way we see ourselves and see our future, because right now, you know, the only thing that sells is fear, unfortunately. And the only thing that gets people moving is fear. So it's like I can talk about, you know, Armageddon and the end of the world. I'll probably be very rich if I just talked about how we're all going to die. But I can't, because that's not the truth. The truth is that collectively we can take control of our future, and we can actually build a future of our dreams. And that is the true reality if we so choose to take that power back. So I would say the future can be extremely positive because we're the ones that are manifesting it.
Amazing story. So what's up next for you guys?
Well, Jason's got a few tours he's going on to talk about all the things that he has done in his life, not just the astral traveling, but together we're going to be back at the Alien Cosmic Expo show in Brantford this summer from June 24th to the 26th, and we're actually going to be closing the show that weekend on the Sunday afternoon, where Jason will be talking about a topic we haven't really discussed here today, but it's the Great Spider Web, and it's a very interesting concept about what really is going on in the world we live in. But Jason, I don't know if we have time to talk a little more about that now, but...
yeah, sure. Give us a preview.
Yeah.
Sure. During my travels with different beings, they would always talk to me about something called the spider's web, or the great spider web. And what this is an etheric web that connects many dimensions and many planets together, not just in this universe, but in all universes. So we live in a multiverse. And for those that are able to, I would say, shed their meat suits, their third-dimensional bodies, they can actually travel through the spider's web to many civilizations, many timelines, and many dimensions. And on our planet, unfortunately, the spider's web has been almost turned off or cut by different beings that don't want us to leave this reality. So there are many people like myself and others that are not only teaching about this spider's web, but we're actually reconnecting these grids as we move through the planet and connect with different people.
Wow. So let's give out your contact information for everybody.
Sure. My website is thecrystalsun.com, and the Crystal Sun is SUN, and they can reach me through there.
And Bob, let's give out your information again.
Email is bobmitchellwriter.com, all one word. My website for all my books, including Forbidden Knowledge, is bobmitchellauthor.simplesite.com, and we're both on Facebook, and we're also I have a WordPress site which I write some blogs on and post things, and that's bobmitchellwriter.wordpress.com. And I think Jason's he's going to do a show next weekend. Maybe he can give a little bit of information about that in Toronto, and he's also going to Chicago to do something.
Yes, I think it is May the 7th weekend. I'm just going to double check here. Yeah, it's May 6th, 7th, and 8th. It's called the Gathering of Crystal Light Beings. I think it's called gatheringoflightbeings.com. And that's a spiritual conference that's happening at University of Toronto in a couple weeks. And, I just want to say also that this book that I wrote with Bob, it's basically everything that I thought would be important to get out there is in this book. So it's packed with amazing stories and what I've learned on that side. And I almost wrote this book like I was going to die at the end of the last chapter. So I wanted to get everything out there as much as possible.
That's fantastic. Well, guys, thanks very much for giving us the information and being on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night. This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.